Hi there everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Prestige Liquids. My name is Andrew, and as always it is fantastic to have you here with me again on another whiskey review video. If you are a returning subscriber, thank you for joining me along my journey so far. It is always a pleasure having you here with me. But if you're new to the channel, please consider hitting the bell notification and the subscription button so that you can stay up to date with all future content. Now today's video is a whiskey review video, and I must say it comes with a disclaimer. If you're a whiskey if you are a whiskey purist, what you're about to see may shock and offend you, so this might be the time to switch off this video and watch something else. However, if you are somebody that loves experimentation with whiskey and you like to see distilleries pushing the boundaries of what can be done with whiskey production, then stick around because I'm sure you'll really get a kick out of this video. Now, today's video features the latest single malt release from Archie Rose. Let's get it out of its little bag right here. And it is aptly named Blasphemy. And I am sure that there are a lot of people out there who consider what they have done for this particular release absolute blasphemy. Because this is not a traditional whiskey. So I'm going to read off some notes that I have at the moment about this. But while I'm at it, I shall pour a bit and let that sit. So Archie Rose, they do like to do a lot of collaborations with not so much like other distilleries, but just places that you wouldn't think of in general. Now, I should point out that Archie Rose is an Australian distillery. They are located in Sydney, New South Wales. But moving along with this release, they have collaborated with a coffee roasting house. Now, they have collaborated with the St. Ali Coffee Roasters. They are located in Melbourne, which is the capital city of Victoria, one of our southern states. They have used two of their coffee roasts to blend into this. So they have used their orthodox and their wide awake coffee blends. This release uses pretty much the same 6 malt mash bill that is used in their standard single malt release. So they are using a pale malt, amber malt, caramel malt and a chocolate malt. All of those come from Eastern Australia. An aromatic roasted malt from Germany, and also a peated malt from Caithness in Scotland. The casks that are used for this release are their ex-rye casks. These are a combination of ex-Kentucky bourbon, which I believe makes up the majority of the aging for this, also ex-Apera and Tawny. I also believe that the minimum age of this being, even though it is an NAS, I think the minimum age is 2 years. Which by Australian standards is old enough to be legally called a whiskey. Now, this is also bottled at 40% ABV. So now that we've gotten those notes out of the way, I would like to put that aside. And I'd also like to mention one of the things I guess that probably makes this release so blasphemous, and that is the fact that, like I had mentioned before, this has been bottled at 40%. So normally with a distillery, what they'll do is they'll cut the spirit with water to bring it down to their desired ABV. What Archie Rose have done with this particular release is that they've actually cut it down with cold brew coffee rather than just using standard water. For me, this is something that I've kind of struggled to get my head around, to understand how they can still then call this a whiskey, considering that it has been cut with with coffee, but somehow they've managed to still, I guess, call it a whiskey and not a whiskey liqueur. So yeah, that's what they've done. They've cut the spirit down with coffee, and again, I guess a very unusual practice. So actually, one thing else that I would also like to mention, I've kind of glossed over a lot of the information that you can actually get about this whiskey. One brilliant thing about Archie Rose is that they are extremely transparent about the information that they provide. There is a fact sheet online that pretty much tells you almost exactly everything that they've done, from the time spent in casks, information about the stills that are used, further information about the origins of the malt and all that kind of thing. I will put a link down in the description box down below so that you can read all that information all for yourself, because it would be just way too much for me to put into one video. So moving along onto the review part of this, yeah, cheers. First of all, I'll just like to point out, man, just look at that color. It is absolutely stunning. I mean, it is that dark in the bottle, you can hardly see through it. I mean, having a look at it, it's almost like looking through a bottle of Coca-Cola. It is that dark. I'm guessing a lot of that obviously comes from the coffee influence there. So moving along on the nose. So one thing that you might naturally assume is that the coffee would be very dominant. However, it's not. On the nose, it is very jammy, quite sweet. I'm getting a lot of things like dried apricots, peaches, caramelized sugar. There's quite a lot of vanilla. Sorry, I've got a plane flying over at the moment as well, so forgive me about that. There's a lot of like toffee. Candied apples, definitely. Yeah. Stewed fruits like figs and prunes. The Finns actually have a dessert called, don't quote me on this, I believe it's called kisseli, which is usually like stewed prunes and raisins and apricots and things like that. It's very similar to what I'm getting at the moment. Touch of oak, dark chocolate. It's kind of dusty as well. It has like an old mustiness to it as well, which I'll put down to probably the coffee influence coming through, and maybe a touch of that peated malt. Even though they're using a peated malt in this, that is not very noticeable on the nose at all. It's virtually non-existent. If you search for it, you might find it, but again, it's not easy to spot. Alright, I think a very light hint of golden syrup as well. Alright, let's move along to the palate and let's see what we get. So cheers. The mouthfeel is quite thin, but at the same time it's also, it has a bit of body to it. Coming from the 40%, I was expecting a lot less, but it does have a very slight syrupy texture to it, but again, very thin and very watered down syrup. Right now, a lot of the characteristics of the malt is coming through, so it's very, very grainy, very chocolatey. It has like a nice like milk chocolate note to it. It's also quite dry. I'm also getting a lot of oak influence as well, a touch of vanilla, like a hint of figs and apples. What else? It's also quite salty. There's actually a bit of a saltiness coming through. Very earthy, quite a bit of like leathery notes as well. One thing that I am enjoying about this is just the way the the oak is intertwining with the flavors. This is not an it is not an over oaked whiskey at all. I have to say, in fact, that those oak notes are quite well balanced with the rest of the flavor. Coming towards the back end of the palate, shoe fly, I'm starting to get a bit more of the orchard fruits. So think of things like apples, pears. There's also some citrus notes coming through as well. So I'm getting quite a bit of like orange and mandarin. There is surprisingly quite a lot going on in this glass. It's one of those whiskies that I think once you let it sit aside for a little bit, let it open up, you'll probably be able to extract a bit more flavor from it. Maybe even try adding a drop of water that might open up the bouquet a little bit more. Moving along to the finish, very easygoing, very elegant. It's quite sweet, the finish actually, so I'm getting a lot of like syrupy notes, like caramel, brown sugar, like very fine like baking sugar. Again, those kind of like candied apples as well. Touch of milk chocolate, and then a little bit of the like citrus orange coming through on the end. Now, all in all, I have to say this is quite enjoyable, but one thing that it doesn't do, and one thing that you would expect from having been blended with the with coffee, is that you would expect more of a coffee note to it, and you don't really get an intense coffee profile from it. If you're trying this for the first time and you are expecting a very dominant coffee note, I think initially you'll be quite disappointed because it doesn't really lead you in that direction. I think the easiest way for me to describe this is more so along the lines of if you were to have a very watered down long black. For those of you who are say in the States or maybe some other European countries that might not know what a long black is, that's pretty much just a black coffee, not an espresso, but like just the whole mix of coffee and water. It's a very thin version of that, more water than coffee, or more like a very weak coffee. The type of coffee influence that comes through is more of those softer earthy notes, and again more of those earthier, dustier notes coming through. You don't really have any coffee bitterness coming through, which I guess for a lot of people would be a plus. The only other thing as well that I think kind of lets this whiskey down a bit is the 40% ABV. I think if it was bumped up to about 45, 48, it would have just given it so much more density. It would have had a lot more oomph behind it as well. This is one of those whiskeys that you want to have that power behind it. You want those flavors to be able to last a little bit longer and to be able to get more out of it. Whereas at the moment, I'm finding that it finishes quite short. It doesn't really last very long. But again, that's my opinion. Is this a bad whiskey? No, it is not a bad whiskey. Is it fantastic? No, it's not. It's somewhere definitely in that middle ground. It is definitely enjoyable. It is definitely one of those ones that you'd want to pull out for friends to be like, you want to try something different? Try this. Give it a go. See what you think. Is it worth buying? Definitely. I think at the price point, I think it was going for about $80 or so. For an Australian whiskey bottle, 700ml bottle, excellent price point. Definitely worth a shot. I mean, this, and there's a lot of these released as well. I mean, there was 20,000 bottles released. I have number 1,477. So there is a lot of this available, and I think it is definitely worth giving it a go. So if any of you who have tried this and sorry, if any of you have tried this before, please drop me a comment down below. Let me know what you think. If you haven't tried it yet, definitely take up the opportunity to give it a go. I do not think you will be disappointed. And then once you have tried it, again, let me know what you think. I would like to get a whole bunch of other people's opinions on this, because it is something that will definitely divide a lot of people. You'll have a lot of people that will enjoy it, and you'll have a lot of people, I think, that will hate it. I don't think there's really going to be much of that middle ground when it comes to this whiskey. So I think that's pretty much all I have to say about this one. As I mentioned at the start of the video, my name is Andrew. If you have not yet subscribed to the channel, please hit that bell notification and the subscription button. And I think I'll set up an Archie Rose playlist, as I have reviewed a few other Archie Rose whiskies before in the past. And then that way you can see all those other videos as well. So I'll leave it at that. KIPPIS.